Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to the Booms and Busts podcast. My name is Jonathan Davis. You know, a Marxist, a psychopath, and an unpublished author walks into a bar, and the barman asks, "Drinking alone again, sir?" I have got a truly packed program for you today, and it occurs to me, I miss so much off each and every podcast that I do. We're now on podcast number 79. Look what I'm going to be missing off this podcast. The Extinct Rebellion, Greta Thunberg. Okay, why is no one asking the question why we have to take this 16-year-old seriously, but if it's an ISIS teenager, they were too young to know what they were doing? The climate change fraud, 5G and Chinese spying on us, approved by Theresa May, Labour antisemitism, Twitter banning of conservatives, Trump coming on a state visit, Macron and the Gilets jaunes, China again, video recognition on our streets in the metropolitan area, websites banned in autocratic countries, Saudi executions of innocent people, Spanish elections, Roger Scruton, etc., etc. Today is Monday, the 29th of April, 2019. That's how much didn't make the podcast. So you can imagine, it's got to be blooming good what did make. What I can't miss off is the over 300 Sri Lankan Christians slaughtered by Islamic jihadi terrorists over Easter. May they all rest in peace. And the absolutely disgusting way the global politicians reacted compared to a single lone madman in New Zealand just before. A New Zealand man has pled guilty to sharing the live stream of that Christchurch terror attack. It wasn't a terror attack, it was a lone madman. This sharer is up for 14 years in prison for sharing a news report. There is zero doubt or question we are in an Orwellian world. If you can't see that, then you are totally blind. And if you have friends who can't see it, tell them about the Booms and Busts podcast. Tell them to go to audioboom.com, search for Booms and it will come up. Then click to listen and click to subscribe. And you can click to subscribe as well. The show will automatically be sent to you whenever I publish a new podcast. People need to hear what is going on. I am Sri Lanka, I am Pulwama, I am Charlie, I am Paris, I am Orlando, I am Brussels, I am Nice, I am Munich, I am Berlin, I am Barcelona, I am Colombo, I am London, I am Norway, I am Manchester, I am Kabul, I am Uri, I am Mumbai, I am Madrid, I am New York, I am Ankara. I am sad, so very sad. And angry that the politicians will not even not do something. They won't even acknowledge something is happening. What the hell is going on? How have these monsters got them all in their pockets? I read on the BBC News, not a website I look at very much, but someone tweeted it. An extraordinary, shocking story. In the Indonesian, quote, election, unquote, more than 270 election staff die counting votes. Check it out, listener. People Jeremy Corbyn will eat with: PLO murderers, IRA terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iranian state officials, Czech spies during the Cold War, Chinese Communist Party dictator at Buckingham Palace. People Corbyn won't eat with: the elected President of the United States of America at Buckingham Palace. The father of Julian Assange has come out with exactly what I had been wondering a few days ago. It's just too much of a coincidence that Assange is imprisoned at the same time Ecuador, socialists of course, get a multi-billion-dollar loan from the IMF, aka the United States. Here's Dr. Ron Paul, ex-congressman in Texas. It must be remembered that a vast majority of mankind's history has been spent living under the rule of tyrants and authoritarians. The ideas of liberty are very new when you consider the big picture. By contrast, various forms of socialism and fascism have been adopted over and over again. Be wary of those who try to present these old and tired ideas as something new and exciting. Liberty and free markets are the way forward if we truly desire peace and prosperity. Ron Paul. You know, in 1816, clearly, about 200 years ago, less than 1% of the world's population lived in a democracy. 200 years later, it was nearly 60%. I fear 210 years later, in 2026, it'll be down to 20% if we don't watch what we're doing. Now, Booms and Bus podcast number 78 was on the 15th of April. On that day, in 1945, Bergen Belsen concentration camp was officially liberated. That would not mean the end of the dying. Eating too much or too fast could kill them. The irony. And typhus. The camp was burned to the ground to prevent further infestation. Unfortunately, the principles surrounding that concentration camp survived for decades in the Soviet Union, in China, in North Korea, you name it, and they're rapidly coming back in the West. On the 25th of April in 1915, the Allies, the Brits, the Australians, New Zealand soldiers land at Gallipoli. Their objective is to seize Istanbul and knock Turkey out of the war. Resistance is heavy, and the invaders fail to advance more than a few hundred yards. 58,000 soldiers on our side die over the next 9 months. 58,000. From the following year, 1916, the 25th of April has been commemorated as ANZAC Day. Never forget. So, Finland elected UKIP-type MEPs for the first time. Spain, yesterday, elected UKIP-type MEPs. or MPs for the first time. Collectively, you can also look around the world, Brazil, Germany, Britain, of course, and. All of these political, quote, upsets, unquote, are by so-called populist parties. Wet and dry, economically and socially. I prefer wet and dry to left and right. So it's about individualism against the state. I've said for many years, and I've said for the last 3 years that I've been doing podcasts, listener, it's about them, the establishment, against us, the individual, just trying to make our way. It's not about the socialists and the capitalists. It's about the statists, who are socialists and crony capitalists and fascists and so on, and communists. They're all the same. The civil service, the establishment. It's them against us. One of the reasons why I do the Booms and Busts podcast is to give you some ideas, not advice, some ideas to help you to boost your long-term investment and savings, so that you've got some money that you can say off when you retire, and you retire handsomely. That's one of the reasons why I do the Booms and Busts podcast. Anyone like statistics? Here is a very curious coincidence. Someone asked the question, how much percentage did the governing party of the day pick up between the Euro elections and the next general election? What do I mean by that? Well, in 1999, the Euro elections, the governing party had 28% of the vote. By the time the Euros came, they had 41%, an increase of 13%. In the 2001 general election. In 2004, in the Euros, the governing party in the UK had 23%. In the Euros, they got 36%, an increase of 13%. In 2009, the governing party had got 16% only in the Euros. In the general election, they got 29%. 13% increase. And then next, in 2014, the last Euro elections, the governing party got 23%, and in the Euros, and in the general election of 2015, they got 36%, an increase of 13%. Of course, in the Euros of 2019, the Tories will get, 15 to 20%? Actually, depending on how the chessboard goes, it's entirely possible the Tories in the next general election could get 28 to 33%. And I'll come back to that as for why I say that in a few minutes. I know many of you are throwing your slippers at your computer or your tablet right now. So you think Brexit is complex. I want you to listen to these guys who meet up in a small meeting room at HQ at their employer in Dublin. Which leads me nicely to Alistair Williams, who's explaining in stand-up what Theresa May's deal is all about. If you're not peckish now, you soon will be.
Right, my friend is from another country and she came in, she was like, can you please explain what everyone is annoyed about with this whole Brexit thing? I said, look, imagine if you and 10 of your friends were in a Burger King. Right, and you said, listen, who wants to leave the Burger King? And 6 people were like, we want to leave the Burger King. And then somebody who didn't want to leave the Burger King was like, I'll get us out of here. I'll have a word with the manager. I'll get us a deal. It's like, do we need a deal? Come on, no, you can't leave without a deal. I'll get a deal. You want to leave? Yeah, I'm going to get us a deal, right? So she goes to talk to the manager. She comes back 2 years later. She's been trying to leave. The door says push. She's pulling that thing. Can't get us out. She goes, great news, I've done us a deal to leave. What's the deal? We've got to pay the manager £40 million. And then we get to leave? Technically, yes. What do you mean, technically? Well, physically, we'll still be in the Burger King. But if anyone asks you, are you in Burger King, you'll be able to tell them, no, we left.
Around 6,000 civil servants who had been making plans for a no-deal Brexit have been returned to their normal duties to sweep Brexit under the carpet. On Thursday, the 2nd of May, of course, the Tories and Labour will have much reduced votes. Smaller parties will do relatively well. And without doubt, on the 23rd, in the Euros, the Brexit Party will sweep the board with something like 15 to 20 MEPs. UKIP will get 2 or 3. As I said before, Labour and the Tories, well, I didn't mention Labour, Labour and the Tories will get around 20% of the votes each. Now, the question is, will Tory MPs change from Dr. David Banner into the Incredible Hulk and finally get rid of her when the Tories do incredibly badly this week and on the 23rd of May? And more to the point, will the Tory MPs allow Boris to be one of the last 2 to put to Tory members alongside the Rory guy, the younger guy? Perhaps it will be Sajid David. Perhaps it will be the relative youngster Matt Hancock, the NHS secretary. He's up and coming. Who knows? We know Tory branches want Boris there, but they did in 2016 too. Now, if he was in the last 2, he would win. Boris would become the next leader of the Tory party. Everyone knows this, including the Tory MPs. And that would reignite our hopes for Brexit. It would pretty well ensure a proper Brexit. And of course, it would bring the Tory party back to life. And that is my logic for why the Tories could gain 13% in the next general election. At least. In fact, I'm not joking. The Tories would win by a landslide if the Tories gave us Brexit. You know it, and I know it. So I put it to you, listener, if Boris becomes the Prime Minister and we get Brexit, the Brexit Party will simply die. Yes, I know Farage has said they will fight the next general election, but that's on the basis that May's in charge and that we're not leaving. So, the most pampered politicians in Europe are European Parliament MEPs. They get salaries. Listen to this. You sit down and drink whiskey because you'll need it. How many people knew about this? They get salaries of between 100 and 160,000 euros a year, tax free. They get expenses of 300 euros a day without receipts required. They get gold-plated pensions. When they leave, they get a golden parachute. They get 4 or 5 fully paid staff to do what, I'd like to know? It is an amazing pork trough with massive snouts in it. Hence why everyone wants to be an MEP. It's nice to see Daniel Hannan as the number one candidate for the Tories in the southeast of England. This is the guy who hates the EU and desperately wants to lose his job. He's been telling us this for the last 15 years. So that's why he's running again, and he's the number one candidate. Daniel Hannan, you hypocrite. He's not very desperate, is he? Do you remember I mentioned last time that after the 29th of March wonderful Parliament Square rally that I attended, I also spoke at the Frexit rally, which was amazing, in Church House, just around the corner from Parliament Square. And I tweeted it. I don't know how many people saw it. I kind of get the feeling not many people saw it, which is incredibly dispiriting, that you do these quite interesting things and it appears that not many people are seeing the tweets of these things. Anyway, be interested to know what you think of what I said.
Alors, on va maintenant accueillir Jonathan Davis, qui est économiste et gestionnaire de fonds et podcasteur.
Bonsoir, messieurs, dames. I studied my master's in Lyon. Every year, my family, we go to Europe for our holidays. We have friends all over Europe. The best man at my wedding comes from Mulhouse. Alexander said, I love Europe, but not the EU. J'adore l'Europe. Je déteste l'Union européenne. Did you understand that? The EU, as we know, was started by communists in the 1950s. They're in league with big business, with multinationals. Do you not remember there was someone in the 1930s who talked about the state getting close to the corporate institution? Mussolini, he called it fascism. That's where we're heading to. Big business loves the EU. How many, God knows how many lobbyists there are in Brussels earning a fortune on behalf of big businesses and multinationals for more and more regulations. When the chief executives of these big businesses and their boards of directors, how long do you think they think about regulations? That long. Because they palm it off to a whole department to make sure their businesses are complying with the rules. Well, this is what's happening on the ground. I run a very small wealth management firm. We are 4 people in my company. I cannot tell you how much time, money, and energy I and my colleagues expend meeting these goddamn regulations. Big business loves the EU because of the regulations, so it stops competition from SMEs, PMEs. And the EU loves big business. The EU stops competition from outside of the EU, and big business stops competition inside the EU. And who pays for it all? We do. The UK voted to leave the European Union. The powers that be, the media, the politicians, the big businesses, or in my case, the banks, the party of Davos, they unfortunately, as far as I can tell, are succeeding in reversing the democratic vote. Every single speaker says, we will leave. Of course, I hope that they are right. So far, they have been proven wrong. I hope that you, A, get a vote on leaving, and then B, that you can convince and persuade your compatriots to vote to leave. I hope the Remainers will tell you it will hurt your economy. I'm an economist. It will not hurt your economy. But Brexit, Frexit, Etexit, Hungary exit, it's not about the economy. It's never been about the economy. It's about democracy. Vive la France, vive le Royaume-Uni, mais surtout, vive l'indépendance. Je vous remercie.
So, pardon the franglais, but well, that was me a few weeks ago. You might have seen that it is now absolutely proven the pro-EU bias on the BBC. First of all, you've got the Radio 4 Today programme, of 4,275 guests between 2005 and 2015 who talked about the EU, a paltry 132 were leavers. 3.2% of today interviewees were anti the EU, which means 96.8% of interviewees on the Today programme were Remainers. 17.4 million then voted to leave. On the Andrew Marr show, we find that 85% are pro-EU and only 15% were Brexit guests. On Sunday Politics, 73% pro-EU guests and 27% Brexit guests. It will not surprise you. Well, maybe it will. It kind of did me. 860,000 BBC licence fee cancellations over the last 12 months. Really? Nearly 1 million? So what are these people doing? Okay, they're going to Netflix and whatever, but really, aren't they getting letter after letter? Aren't they getting visits? I'd love to hear anyone, have they actually done this and what's been their experience? Robin Tilbrook tweeted on the 24th of April, "We are filing in the High Court our claimant's reply to the defendant's summary grounds of resistance in the Queen on the application of the English Democrats versus the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union." Well, it's still going on, folks. Well, on verra. I did tweet this. Why didn't UKIP do this at Gerard Batten MEP? Didn't get a response, of course. Hardly surprising, really. They should have done. The world Muslim population is 1.8 billion. The world Jewish population is 14 million. The number of Muslim majority countries, 50. The number of Jewish majority countries, 1, with the landmass of Wales. United States religious hate crime data 2017. 20% target Muslims. Now are you listening? 60% target Jews. Criticize Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, any other religion. No response. Criticize Islam. You are a far-right, racist, extremist, bigot, Nazi, xenophobe, Islamophobe. If Islamophobia is simply a fear of Islam, why isn't there Hinduphobia, Sikhophobia, etc.? Because no other religion's holy text commands believers to, quote, slay the unbelievers wherever you find them, unquote, Quran 2:191. The legendary Prime Minister of Israel from the 1970s, Golda Meir, said, "If the Arabs put down their guns, there would be no more fighting. If the Israelis put down theirs, there would be no more Israel." Very interesting chart I've got. The number of Americans with no religion rose 260% in the last 3 decades. So, number of Jews flat, black Protestants down a bit, mainline Protestants down from 27% of the population to 12% of the population. Catholics down from 24% to 27% down to 23%. Evangelists up from 17% to 24%. No religion, as I say, up from 5% to 23% of the American population. How interesting. Muslims were not asked. Let's move on to economics. Amartya Sen, the winner of the 1998 Nobel Prize in Economic Science, noted, "No famine has ever taken place in the history of the world in a functioning democracy." I have a chart here of the global monetary policy map for tightening. In other words, the percentage of central banks, whether in emerging markets or in developed markets, where the last rate move was a hike. In developed markets, we're now at 50% of central banks where the last rate move was an increase. We're at nearly 60% of emerging markets where the last central bank interest rate move was an increase. Why do they raise interest rates? It is because they see rising inflation. UK aircraft deliveries are marching at the current rate, the fast pace of 2018. I found this really interesting. From the UK, we delivered 311 aircraft in just the first quarter of 2019. And that included 88 wide-bodied aircraft to match the record set in 2015. And get this, the global aircraft manufacturer industry total order backlog is an astonishing 14,000 commercial aircraft. What an absolutely huge industry is airplanes and airlines. Absolutely huge. There's 14,000 planes on order. And by the sound of it, UK aircrafts will deliver, 12 or 1,300 aircraft this year alone. I find that remarkable. Now, you probably heard about central banks increasing the size of their balance sheets. They did it massively since the great financial crash of 2008 by basically creating money electronically and buying bad assets from disgusting banks. Well, in America, the Federal Reserve balance sheet went from 800 billion to 4,000 billion since 2008. It peaked at 4.5 trillion in January 15. And in fact, recently, it's been going down for the last couple of years, and indeed it has now got below 4 trillion. So clearly it's gone down 11 or 12% from the peak, as I say, in January 15. Now, anyone who reads any of this stuff will know that the doomsayers, the market's bears, were shouting from the rooftops that quantitative tightening, the opposite of quantitative easing, QE, will have a massive negative effect on the stock market. Well, since the peak in the Fed balance sheet and the fall of $500 or $600 billion from the Fed's balance sheet, the S&P 500 has gone up 40%. Stop listening to bears. Inflation, well, I tell you, it's definitely slipping. It's definitely falling. Well, so long as you ignore property, oil and gas, equities, groceries, health and beauty aids, insurance, taxes, accountancy, vehicles, healthcare, universities and tertiary education, private education, textbooks, entertainment, sports, concerts, and utilities. Ignore all of those and I can guarantee to you that inflation is falling. Markets. We're pretty early for markets, so that's good. Now, I'm going to quote you from many market participants' favorite trading or investing or speculating book of them all. It was written in 1923, a century ago practically. And it was about a guy who, I'm not actually sure if he was a real person or a fictional character. And all the anecdotes and experiences and real people who we know were in this book and named, and we hear about their actions and what happened in the markets in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Jesse Livermore. I'm not quite sure if Jesse Livermore actually happened. By all accounts, this person started with nothing, literally. And he somehow got into the trading floors, and by today's standards, he made himself a billionaire. And then he lost it all. And then he made himself, by today's standards, a billionaire again. And then he lost it all. And he did it again. Until at the age of 41, in a telephone booth just out at the foyer of a restaurant, at the age of 41, so this would be in the early 1930s, he committed suicide. He could no longer take the emotional turmoil of the greatest highs, elations that the world could possibly bestow upon you, along with the greatest deep depressions that he bestowed upon himself. But Edwin Lefebvre, the author, wrote an amazing book about the life and times of Jesse Livermore. It also expresses very well the times of the late 19th century in Chicago on Wall Street, right into, as I say, the 1920s. Quote, "Nowhere does history indulge in repetitions so often or so uniformly as in Wall Street. When you read contemporary accounts of booms or panics," I might interject with the phrase booms and busts, "the one thing that strikes you most forcibly is how little either stock speculation or stock speculators today differ from yesterday. The game does not change, and neither does human nature." And that is the point. Markets are driven by fear and greed. Whenever you read a piece that 70% of all trades our computers trading with each other. Always remember, a human has programmed that computer. When the markets are falling, it's amazing how many people become bearish. When the markets are rising, it's amazing how many people become bullish. Not just private investors, but old, weary, old hand professional investors too. Everyone gets caught by it. I might reiterate to you that in the stock market crash of Q4 of 2018, we didn't sell a single stock. Because as far as I could tell, this was a short-term panic. The NASDAQ this year is up 22%. The S&P 500 is up 17%, and it's at an all-time high. The Dow Jones is up 14%, and it's practically at an all-time high. According to Barron's Spring 2019 Big Money poll, only 49% of the 148 professional money managers, which means portfolio managers, are bullish about the prospects for stocks over the next 12 months. Only 14% of clients are bullish. When you get such low bullish numbers, there's one fact: there is no euphoria in financial markets. And you do not get major corrections without some level of euphoria. Fear and greed. The markets are fearful. That is largely the reason why the markets are rising. Because the market is there to financially hurt the most people possible. If you're listening to bears, if you are a bear yourself, I've got a message for you and for them. Throughout recorded financial market history, all bear market rallies, I'll translate that. A bear market could be 3, 6, 12, 18, 24 months. It's heading down, it's going from top left in the chart to bottom right. But it doesn't go in a straight line. In the meanwhile, it has rallies. All bear market rallies end within 2.5 months. And not one of them has taken the indices to new all-time highs. The current bull market started on Boxing Day 2018. It is 4 months old, and one of the three major US indices is at an all-time high. One of the others is practically there. I said to you, if the FTSE in the UK got above 7,200, we are probably in a multi-year bull market. If the FTSE got above 7,400, we are in a multi-year bull market. The FTSE today closed at 74.40. We are in a multi-year bull market until we are not, but we are. So I hope you are investing in global stocks. You'll do as far as I can tell, you will do very well in global stocks for quite some time to come. Don't listen to the bears. Great story about a new fund in which we're investing, the Woodford Patient Capital Trust. Patient as in time, not a visitor to a hotel. To a hospital, should I say. Goodness me. I was reading the Financial Times recently at the weekend, not something I do very often, but I just happened to be in the library, so I picked it up. And there were fund managers apoplectic with rage that since this fund opened up in 2014 or 2015, it's gone down 30%. Well, the clue's in the title, guys. So we've entered, and it's over the last year, it's been doing even better than the FTSE. You might want to check it out. Just an idea. We are now at 54 minutes. How long have I got? Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go straight to the US dollar. The speculation level in the dollar long reached a 4-month high in the week to April the 16th. It's been slightly falling since. We keep hearing about all the dollar bears out there. Oh, the dollar's toast, the dollar, everyone's selling the dollar. Well, the data shows that actually this is a really crowded trade. Most people, most market participants are long the dollar. And what did I say about the market? The market is designed to hurt the most people the most. If the dollar goes down, you watch commodities go into the stratosphere. A year ago, Morgan Stanley and other bank analysts were calling for electric vehicle penetration of 8 to 12% by 2025. Already, China is on track to exceed 8% by the end of this year and 50% by 2025. Global electric vehicle sales in January 2017, 40,000. January 18, 70,000. December 18, are you listening? 270,000. On the 15th of April, the US Department of Commerce completed its investigation into uranium imports under what they call Section 232. Is the mining of uranium an issue of national security? It submitted its recommendations on that day to the White House. The recommendations remain confidential. The president has 90 days to respond from the 15th of April. A spokesman for the original petitioners told Reuters, "We believe that President Trump will recognize the danger of relying on large and increasing levels of uranium imports from Russia, China, and our geopolitical rivals." Do you realize that 18% of American energy comes from nuclear, and yet they only produce 2% of their uranium need? It is unconscionable. The game is on. Uranium miners, folks. In China, there's 1.3 billion people, 1 million electric vehicle sales last year, up from 330,000 2 years before. Are you receiving the Booms and Busts report? If not, you bloomin' well should be. Make sure you send me your email address and your full name. You will never be junk mailed. It's free. The best way to take control over a people and control them utterly is to take a little of their freedom at a time, to erode rights by 1,000 tiny and almost imperceptible reductions. In this way, the people will not see those rights and freedoms being removed until past the point at which these changes cannot be reversed. Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. Mark Twain. When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years. And on that note, listener, thank you for listening. Please tell your friends about the Booms and Busts podcast. I will see you again